Hello, my name is Bob Swanson. For those of you that I've never met, I'm a retired Los Angeles police lieutenant. After retiring, I attended King's College and Seminary, and then after that, I volunteered at my home church at Village Church Burbank in California as a volunteer staff member. It's my privilege, and I thank you, Aaron, for letting me have the opportunity to share some thoughts with the Move brothers. You know, I confess I'm a sucker for country music ballads, which is kind of what got me started thinking about doing this particular devotional. And I was listening to this one song, and it had this phrase, "Sometimes I get lucky and forget." The context is obviously a man who has lost his love, and he gets lucky and forgets the one that he lost. And I think that's how we often get through life, don't we? We are able to forget and block out some of the painful grief or hurt that we experience. But I got to thinking about that song, and what really struck me is that the problem really is too often I forget what I need to remember. Too often I forget the very thing that I ought to remember. And one of the best things about going on a Move trip for me is discovering these kinds of things, and in discovering in part that in serving others, we find that we ourselves are encouraged and God does a work in us. And so I want to take the next few minutes in talking about one of those experiences that happened to me. In 2013, we went to Mare, Africa. And I will admit, of the 4 builds that I've been on, it was probably the most challenging. It was hot, which is not unusual, but there was no shade and it didn't cool down at all at night. Supplies were slow in arriving. The location was far from medical facilities, and the conditions, without my going into it, just take my word for it, were very unsanitary. The result was that within a week, I would say, it's not exaggerating to say a good third, maybe more, of the team was bedridden, either vomiting and with dysentery. And toward the end of the second week, it got to me, and I became dehydrated and was down for the count. And I was probably, frankly, hours away from needing to go to the hospital. And I hazily remember one of the team members, I think it was Steve Klein, kneeling down by the lower bunk where I was sleeping and telling me that he had found these 2 electrolyte pills in the bottom of his gym bag, and he was putting them in my drinking bottle. And he said, "I want you to drink it up." And within a day, I had enough strength to attend the Sunday service. And as I sat there during that service, which was being translated from French into the local dialect and then into English, so it was a little bit laborious, I had plenty of time to start thinking, why did I go on this trip? And all the reasons flooded my mind, like I'm too old for this. I have heart disease. I have a pacemaker. My back hurts. My real ministry is back home with my 11 grandchildren and my wife. And then something happened, strange happened, as I listened to the local pastor preach. It seemed I understood what he was saying before it was translated, and whatever I was hearing was deeply comforting me, and I became overcome with the words that he spoke. His text was in Hebrews chapter 11, verses 1 through 4. I'm not going to read all 4. I want to emphasize the part that really spoke to me. The larger context of that chapter, as you all know, is that it's kind of the roll call of the faithful. My Bible calls it the triumph of faith. And basically it lists all the people, starting with Abel, who this verse is about, all the way up to Solomon and King David. And the point being made was that it was by faith that they were made right with God, and that their lives had made a difference because of their faith. They had not lived perfect lives, but they had lived a life of faith in God and his purposes. And my mind became stuck on verse 4, which I'm going to read. And it says, "By faith Abel offered to God a better sacrifice than his brother Cain." And you remember that Abel brought an animal sacrifice, and Cain brought vegetables, basically. And it's not that God's a vegetarian, he doesn't like veggies, but he accepted Abel's sacrifice because of his faith. And it goes on to say, by faith Abel offered to God a better sacrifice than his brother Cain, through which he obtained witness that he was righteous, in other words, right with God, and God himself was the witness to his faith. And through his faith, this is the phrase that kept going over and over in my mind. And though he is dead, yet still he speaks. And then the pastor went on to say, many of you have suffered and made great sacrifice by faith to come far from home. And my mind leaped. I said, he knows, God knows what I'm feeling. And then he spoke these assurances. And I heard it as if God was speaking it to me. He said this, he said, be confident that God has received your sacrifice. God is pleased and has accepted it. He has witnessed your faith. God speaks well of you. And I will admit to you, among us men, I was overcome with emotion in hearing those words. He went on to say, living by faith may create its own struggles, and you may be suffering, which I did feel like I was, but God is with you. Beyond this life, your acts of faith in coming to our community to build this church and the faith my people have witnessed in your sacrifice will have an impact long after you're gone from this place. Although you will soon be gone from us, yet will you speak. He said, your lives have and will make a lasting difference. Man, I was convicted and I was comforted. Convicted that moments earlier I had wished I wasn't here, and comforted realizing that God was with us and that he was honoring what we were doing there. And after that message, I felt strangely refreshed and at peace and slowly recovered so that I was able to join in the cement bucket brigade, of course under the watchful eye of Steve Klein and Drew Bethany. I said at the beginning of this share time that there are some things in life that are okay to forget for a while. But the lesson I learned in Mare is far more important, and that is that there are some things we must never forget. I think we must never forget that there are two ways to live a life. One is to live your life by yourself and for yourself and be forgotten. The other is to live a life by faith, serving God and serving others, and that will make an eternal difference. John 15 puts it this way, if you live your life that way, your life will have fruit that remains. It will never spoil. Look, here's the truth of it. We don't need to go to far-off lands to live a life of faith. The greatest challenge and greatest opportunity for us to live a life by faith is right in front of us, right at the center of our lives with our friends, our spouses, our kids, our grandkids, our church. And I don't have a list of things that you must do or I must do to demonstrate that we're living a life of faith, but I do know this. Living a life that speaks beyond the grave means most profoundly serving God by serving others, especially those closest to us. And we can do that if we remember that we can be confident that God has received our sacrifice, that he is pleased and accepted it, that he has witnessed our faith, that God will speak well of us. You know, move trips are great. They're great because it's often there that these lessons are learned. In contrast to our culture, which says if you don't look out for number one, you lose. The Bible reassures us that living a life for others of faithful service to God is the way we make a lasting difference. I'm grateful for Move Ministries that has taught me and many others what it means to live a life by faith. If you can go on one, and we will be having opportunities to go on them, you might be surprised what you learn to never forget. Thank you for letting me share.